begin the meeting based on the agenda that's been posted. First item is the approval of the minutes from last December's meeting. You have a comment? Oh, wait a minute. It's here. There you go.
I move the approval of the minutes.
Do we have a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes as they stand. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Representative Fisher, may I ask you, Commissioner, sorry, we all call each other Commissioner in the ULC, no matter what you used to do or what you're currently doing. Would you take just a minute and introduce yourself to whoever may be joining us online?
I'd be happy to. Thank you,
you.
Mr. Chair. So Jordan Tusher, I represent District 44 in the legislature, which is a little piece of West Jordan, but mostly South Jordan, on the west side, kind of the northwest side of South Jordan. Been in the legislature for 2 terms now, and have 3 kids, 12, 10, and 7, 2 boys, 1 girl. They keep us very busy, and really excited for this opportunity. I graduated from BYU J. Reuben Clark Law School in 2012, and practiced mostly international law, worked for a firm for about 3 years, and then took a job with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I've been there almost 10 years, managing all their contracting negotiation for facilities across the United States and Canada.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you with us. We look forward to having you fully involved in the commission, both as a member of the Utah Commission and the Uniform Law Commission nationally.
Thank you.
Getting involved in the drafting and other assorted committees that the ULC has, and attending their meetings is a great way to know what others are thinking and also have an influence on legislation nationally. Next item on the agenda is a review of the Uniform Law Commission acts approved at our last annual meeting. We'll ask Commissioner Weeks to address that for us. One moment. There you go.
And since we all spent, well, most of us, Representative Tusher wasn't able to join us for this meeting, but since we all sat through hours of meetings, I will refrain from getting into specifics on what they do unless we want to talk about that. But just a review of the acts that we approved at our annual meeting in July. We approved circulation and presentation for the states for the Consumer Debt Default Judgments Act, the Health Care Decisions Act, the Model Public Health Emergency Authority Act, the Special Deposits Act, and the Unlawful Restrictions in Land Records Act. So those are the 5 new acts that are available for consideration by legislatures in the country.
Commissioner Jones?
I was a part of the committee that rewrote the Healthcare Decisions Act, which is an update to that act, and it modernizes it and modernizes the language. It makes it easier for people to file, and that is one that I would encourage Utah legislators to consider. I don't think it would have much opposition. There was a member of Intermountain Healthcare legal team that I referred the information to, and he had a little bit of input on it as well. It frankly protects hospitals from liability as they follow the Healthcare Decisions Act. So if anything, healthcare providers would support this, I think. So anyway, as you're considering what to file, that would be one that I would recommend.
Thank you, Commissioner. The next item on the agenda is a review, which I would think would not take long, of the current study and drafting committees on which our members are serving. Commissioner Tusher is new, so he has no committee assignments. He's not had a chance yet, but it's coming. Trust me. Commissioner Jones, you want to review yours for us?
I'm just on one now, in as much as the Healthcare Decisions Act became a recommended act. So I'm on the Transfers to Minors Act. That's it.
Okay. Do you know what that's about?
I have yet to attend a meeting, but
Have they held a meeting?
I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, but it has to do with if minors are in a position, one of the issues is if minors are in a position where they're actually making money, how that might be overseen. So I don't know very much yet.
Well, I have,
Mr. Chair,
yes, ma'am.
hi. I just wanted to
Commissioner
say, hi, everybody. Sorry, I was a few minutes late. On the Transfer to Minors Act, we had a meeting last month, or no, it was still December, a few weeks ago in the Joint Editorial Board for the Utah Family Law, and they are talking about proposing a law to deal with bloggers and social media influencers. And we had someone from your committee, Gay, make a presentation about the Minors Act. And we're thinking that, well, one of the issues that we have to deal with in dealing with the money that these kids earn is whether or not we want to coordinate with this act or do a separate act, but in either case, I'm sure we would at the very least reference what you do with that act. I mean, we're talking millions of dollars and millions of viewers that these children are earning for their parents. And there's almost no regulation for that. And there's been some cases where children turn 18 after being raised on camera and find out the parents have spent all the money. And so we're looking at, how much you interfere or don't interfere as a government and what you do to help protect the resources that these kids are generating.
Generating. The Uniform Gifts to Minors Act has been around forever. When I was a
Right.
child, I think
Yeah.
my grandfather used that to put a little money in the bank for me. And that's designed to protect the transfer of money so that the child eventually gets it, but it also has some tax complication or implications. So
Yeah,
that'll be interesting to follow up on. Look
yeah, it's
forward to
very
that.
interesting.
I'm on two committees. One, the Unincorporated Organization Acts Committee has about finished its work. We've been meeting now for 2 years. I think it'll be a final presentation this coming summer. We have one more meeting scheduled in March. And it is an attempt to update and coordinate the Uniform Partnership Act, Uniform Limited Partnership Act, Uniform Limited Liability Company Act, and others that implicate business organizations so that they all use essentially the same terminology. So they have similar provisions for unwinding and for reinstating an organization that by act of law ends up unincorporated or disassociated. It's interesting work. It's like forever long. It's like 600 pages or something. So I think they're booking us 2 full weeks to read it to the commission. We're just going to read the changes, I'm told. I'm also on the Marketable Title Committee, which is intended to upgrade and simplify the Land Transfers Act. We've held no meetings as of yet. We held one just to discover who was on the committee, but we've not done anything of consequence yet. 20 states have adopted some sort of Marketable Title Act, but the others have not, and they have interesting individual laws that impact that. The idea is to try and offer a uniform proposition so that all states deal with real property in a similar fashion, since many people now are able to acquire land in more than one state. We hope that'll be helpful. Representative Weeks, or Commissioner Weeks,
That's quite the upgrade.
thank you.
I just finished up being vice chair of the, now I'm going to blank on the name, Determination of Death Update Committee. I mentioned that even though we're not going to be presenting the bill, we've essentially closed the committee, but we have been asked by the American Journal of Bioethics to write up an article on how that went and what we went through, and so that'll be an interesting thing that'll be coming up that both the chair and the reporter and I will be publishing.
Is that the one that got pulled?
That's the one that got pulled. It was trying to update when we determine death has happened, and that's pretty easy for circulation and respiration. It's a little harder when it comes to the brain. And so trying to update that, we found that there wasn't really consensus. The medical groups brought this to us because you can be in one hospital on one side of the street and another hospital on the other side of the street, and they have developed different procedures on deciding whether you're dead or not. And so they wanted some clarity, but I think the one thing we're missing is really some champion from the medical community to say, this is what we want, and to push through some of the objections on it. And there doesn't seem to be consensus on exactly where to go. So that's kind of officially on hold until maybe that climate changes, and we're being asked to publish that, and that should come out fairly soon.
I guess the complication was what? When a person is dead in order to transplant living organs and.
Transplant eligibility was part of it. One of the major sticking points also is particular religious groups have views on what constitutes death and what does not, and whether exemptions should be made, or how much room to give philosophical views of death versus physical views of death. It just became rather complicated without anyone having a real firm direction to go.
I presume medical professionals and hospitals would prefer not to be accused of killing someone on purpose.
There was a lot of discussion about that as well.
I'll bet there
And
was.
so, and as frankly, as medical science is moving forward, that line's getting more and more blurred in lots of different ways that are still kind of a challenge. So that's where we're at on that. And I've been asked and went to my first meeting at the same time Commissioner Falk did early this month for virtual currency consumer protection, that drafting committee, trying to get some guidelines. It's probably a little late, but try to get some guidelines on better ways to protect consumers when they purchase and participate in digital currency markets with Bitcoin, et cetera. So that's just underway. And I was also just recently asked to be the vice chair of the parliamentarians group. So I'll be
Excellent.
working on that.
Thank you. Commissioner McHale.
Thank you. Good work, Eric.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a rock star. Hey, let me start by telling you what I read this week. It was a summary of Congress, and the current Congress right now, based on the work that they've done, they are the least effective Congress in decades and decades and decades. And it was an interesting study that I read about just what they've done, what they've accomplished, which is very, very little. So the committee that I'm assigned to, let me talk about that committee, but I think there's some other ideas. You know, when I think of the scope and planning committee and the ideas of things that we need to fix in America, I just bring it up because Congress is not getting their job done. And part of why it's fun having Commissioner Tusher here is he works hard in the legislature, but we really do have an opportunity to bring states together and unify. So I'm on the Judicial Interview of Children Committee. I'm looking at my chair. We just had a meeting in Fort Worth. I went down to Fort Worth. We were at Texas A&M. Barbara Atwood from the University of Arizona is our chair, and just the nicest, most lovely person to work with. We've got the Chief Justice from Supreme Court of Texas on our committee. That's an interesting issue. How do we interview kids in that setting? I think one of our best members, honestly, was Senator Pickard out of Nevada. He's state senator, Republican state senator, does a lot of family law work, but doing a lot of work there. It's been a good committee. I know we're going to follow up about the same time we get down to legislative session. But as I've gotten into this now, my ideas are just churning with the Planning Scope Committee of what issues we could tackle that we really do need to tackle that are just not getting resolved by Congress.
Thank you. Commissioner Falk.
Well, I was on the Default Judgment Committee, and I do not recommend it.
You don't recommend being on the committee, or you don't recommend the act?
Do I need to apologize to Commissioner Falk for my comments about Congress?
Well,
I will say that your boss is always listed in the top 10 most efficient and effective members of Congress. So if we could just clone him, we'd be okay.
All right, well, I do appreciate that, and I was kind of wondering if you were attacking me specifically or my boss, or just the other 434 of them, but
Yes,
I-
the other
it is difficult to get something done when you have over 500 people trying to get an agreement. Anyway, yeah, I was on the, I do recommend being on a committee. I do not recommend passing the default judgments bill. Yeah, it's gonna have to wait. I just didn't like it. And I thought that what they were trying to do was admirable, but I think they went overboard. And because I judge small claims court, I think a lot of what they're basically doing is trying to put a whole bunch of information in the complaint itself so that people know who is really suing them as opposed to assignees and collection agencies and all these other things, which is good, but I think they went a little overboard. And they realized that once you file a complaint, you don't know whether or not that's going to go to a default judgment. And so you're requiring people to put all this information in that may or may not be needed. And there was a lot of controversy or conflict between the consumer rights people and the court people. And it passed on a very narrow vote. And I wouldn't recommend it.
Okay. Other committees?
That's the only committee. I just got done with that this last session. I expect I will be hopefully creating a study committee on the social media issue for kids, and I will ask to be on that committee. And other than that, I'm not doing anything else other than being on the family law joint editorial committee.
Excellent. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hey, Commissioner Falk, one thing when you do the social media, there was a Senate bill that was run by a really good senator, but there was a House bill that was even better, run by Commissioner Tusher. So you may want to rope him in, and it would be a great place for him. He's definitely our legislative expert in the body.
Okay, it's good to know. Thank you.
Commissioner Hilliard, are you with us? There we go.
Yes, I am.
Thank
I
you.
have a really bad cough, so I'm coughing all the time. So if I break up speaking, I'm still here with you and I'll come back. I'm serving on 2 committees right now. We're finishing up one. It's called Modifications of Mortgage. And the issue is you're a big lender. You've got the first mortgage on a building. There's 2 or 3 second mortgages to it. And then the company's going to go broke, but they need to renegotiate with the first mortgagor to refinance the terms of the mortgage or maybe get a little bit more money. And the trouble is, under most state laws, if they do that, they have to go back and have to get agreements of all the second or third or fourth mortgage people. And this bill would basically say you could do that under certain circumstances where you really were not jeopardizing the position of the second or third. The trouble is, when you go back and negotiate, you find you have to give, it's like negotiating for hostages. The second thing I'm on is called the pre-notification of merger. And this is really being pushed by Dan Robbins, who was our past president. And it's really looking at currently, if you're a company of more than 20 million and you want to merge with another company, you have to give notice to the federal government and then to the states that they have principal businesses in or do business in. And then the states can get the information. Right now, the states have no way of getting the information from the business unless the business will give it to them. The businesses are really concerned about giving that to any state because they're concerned about confidentiality. So we put a really good provision about confidentiality. And then I think most of the business we talked to, I've talked to Dan, what's Dan's last name, up at the Attorney General's office. He's been following along and he's really quite supportive of what we're trying to do. It's not been cleared yet. It'll probably, both of those bills will be approved. I'm fairly confident in our summer meeting. I should mention,
Burton.
yeah,
Burton?
Dan Burton. Yeah, that's who I've been working with. I should mention to Justin that Lowry Snow was on this mortgage modification committee with me. Since he's no longer with us, that opening is there. And again, Lowry was really a good member of that because he's done a lot in real estate. He understood the real estate issues they were talking about quite clearly. But I'd be glad to talk if he's interested in it. I'll be more than happy to check with Dan or now the current president is Lisa out of Philadelphia and see if she'll appoint him on that.
Thank you. I noticed that you've invited Libby Snyder to join us. I can't tell if she's she on? Okay. Lyle, was there a purpose in having Libby join us, or is she just listening?
No, I wanted her to join. You there, Libby?
Yes.
I just wanted her to listen to our discussion and give us some insight about some of the bills we talk about, where they're passing easily in some states, where there's opposition. Just kind of gives a feel. I really sense like that one of the real issues we have in the commission right now is we need more enactments. You know, we draft the laws, and then a lot of times the commissioners don't pick it up and try to push them through the state legislatures. And so we need to do that. And I think that's one of the reasons why members of the Utah Commission have gotten pretty good appointments in the conference, because we've been so successful in getting bills through. Now, we haven't been too good the last couple of years, but we've really done a pretty good job in getting it through. And I think if we could target 4 or 5 or 6 at most like that and work on them this next year, I think that's the thing the leadership looks at when they make appointments to committees.
And Libby, thanks for joining us. I wanted to give you a heads up that one of the things we'll do before we get over is I'm happy to go through your office's specific recommendations for us. So we'll do that as part of this meeting as well.
In fact, that's where we are. Commissioner Weeks, you want to go ahead and lead that discussion?
Sure, and Libby, we're pretty informal here, as you can see. Just feel free to raise your hand if you want to chirp in or something. Each year we get a legislative plan that the Chicago office puts together for us of things they think that might interest us. One of the things they've mentioned that should be non-controversial is in 2022 we updated the Uniform Commercial Code with quite a few amendments. I don't believe that is a bill that's been opened at the legislature yet, so that's one we may want to consider just so we're current in those UCC changes. And I'll leave, if you want to discuss these, please stop me. Otherwise, I'll just go through and we can talk about whichever ones we want to. The commission has also highlighted the community property, and this should be on the front of your legislative plan here. They've highlighted the Community Property Disposition at Death Act. We enacted the previous version of that, and this is updates to it. They also pointed out that we have not passed the Family Law Arbitration Act, and the Utah Revised Law Notarial Acts. That's been sitting for a while. I know that's, I would have to check with the drafter on that, but we went ahead and revised all our notary laws right before this came through. And so I think there's a lack of appetite for the notary division to go ahead and change everything quickly again. So I think that's the holdup on that one rather than any.
Right,
do you have
that's
any-
my memory.
Okay. And so that one, you know, in time we may want to do that, but I still think they're still adjusting to the changes we made just a year or two ago. And then here's one that's near and dear to my heart, the Recognition and Enforcement of Canadian Domestic Violence Protection Orders Act. That was the first drafting group I worked on. It's a fairly simple bill. I think most of the states along the Canadian border have adopted it. It just makes paperwork and coordination a little better if we're trying to enforce domestic violence protection acts on one side of the border or the other. So that's one we could
Does it
consider.
go both ways?
It does go both ways. And what happened is Canada passed one, and we worked with them to pass something that would be congruent with them a few years ago. So that's,
Eric, this is Lyle. Can you hear me?
Yep,
yep.
go ahead.
I was told that this arbitration act that we're talking about, family law, the Utah Supreme Court in a very recent case had a situation, and they said you really need this Uniform Family Arbitration Act to be adopted in Utah. So they said you ought to get that done. The Supreme Court in a case and decision talked about it. And so they had a broadcast this, I think in August, that they put on by the staff in Chicago. And I contacted several of the family law leaders and I gave them the information. I don't know if they joined in. They were going to have a half a day or all day discussion about this law and how it works and answer people's questions. And I really hope we'd get some in there, because I think the biggest frustration I had is I'd talk to all these chairmen of committees and they'd say, oh, that looks pretty good. And then they never get back to me. I found that sometimes I just had to file a bill. And once I file a bill, they come out of the woodwork. what are you doing? What are you doing? We're getting something done. And I can always amend it and change it or even kill it if I decide to. But I found that was the way to get people's attention is to file a bill.
Thank you. Commissioner Fowl, your hand is up. Did you have something you want to say?
Well, yeah, I was actually going to talk about the Family Law Arbitration Act as well. I know that one of the reasons that they did the act was because the courts are so backed up in some states, and we don't have as bad a problem here as we do in some states. So the only motivation I see for it is, people who simply want to have a more private divorce, or sometimes they're in a hurry, but not usually. But I'd be happy to reach out to the family law section if anybody is interested in running it, and see if they want to take a position on it one way or the other, and that might make someone that's in the legislature there feel more comfortable about running it. Senator McKell or Representative Tischer.
And maybe,
Thank you, Commissioner Falk. I think Representative Tusher and I are gonna have to, we're gonna have to pick one or two of these and pass something. So here's one that I pick. You haven't got to it. I will take this one. Civil remedies for unauthorized disclosure of intimate images. That's an issue in our state. One of the things that I actually looked at, KSL did a big story on this. Intimate images and AI and images that are modified. I was worried that our criminal code hadn't caught up, and our criminal code is actually pretty good. And I had the full thing brief, but I don't think our civil remedies were there. So that's one that I think we ought to do right now. I think it's really timely.
I was on that committee, and I would.
I volunteer. Make the pitch, but I'm volunteering.
No, actually, I think it'd be great. I'm not really making a pitch so much as just, I guess, a word of caution.
Okay.
That they should probably be prepared for a court challenge on that bill. Just because it became so complex with the First Amendment. And I'm not saying don't do it, because I think it was a good bill and we worked really hard on it. But it is a really tough First Amendment issue. But I like the fact that it provides a private rate of action. The trick is just getting to the right defendant. And Google was at our meetings, and they were very opposed to the direction that we chose. And so they may very well show up
Right.
to fight against it, but I think it's a good bill.
Thank you, Commissioner. Go ahead.
and for the benefit of Commissioner Tusher, just to give you an overview, in this meeting, what we do, and we're lucky that we have two legislators on our state commission, because you two are the most important people in this meeting and during session, because you're the ones who get to carry the bills. But what state commissions usually do in these situations is the commissioners will often have a vote to decide which bills they would recommend that legislators take a look at. And so the purpose of this meeting is usually to recommend what we think are interesting or potentially viable ideas for Utah legislators to consider. We do that, and then we usually reach out often to the two of you first to see if there's some of those that you would like to look at or run or talk to colleagues about. So if someone wants to make a motion on any of these, we can certainly do that, and that motion would be to recommend that the commission would ask legislators to consider drafting bills in this area.
So can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Along those lines. So when you say recommend, see if I can get this down, recommend legislation, this is for the 2024 general session?
Yes, it is.
And it seems, I mean, you guys have these meetings all the time, but it seems a little late in the planning to get bills drafted and passed in, a couple months.
The bill is pretty well drafted. That's what makes it a little easier with the uniform law
I
proposition.
try that with my drafting attorneys. It doesn't seem to get them
Doesn't work
to
that
do it
well?
any faster, yeah.
You're dealing with the wrong people.
It has definitely gotten harder.
Has
on- On bill drafting.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And part of a problem coming into this session is, and Eric will tell you, we just lost 3 attorneys as well. So I think we're scrambling just a little bit. Feels
Staff
like it.
attorneys, as
Drafting
members of the
attorneys.
legislature.
Yep,
Well-
actual drafting attorneys.
And I think too that legislators have become maybe a little more sophisticated in the timing of planning things. So we can put in bills at the very beginning of May. It was, within a month or two of May, there were 1,200 bills filed. And so that creates a very long backlog for our drafting attorneys to be able to get everything
Sounds to
drafted.
me like we ought to reschedule
Yeah.
this meeting for shortly after the summer.
And we
Conference.
certainly could do that. This has been the most convenient time, but I can attest that, the drafting cramp has really increased in the past year or two in particular.
Okay, well, let's talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, we ought to,
Go ahead. Oh,
no,
you're just agreeing? Thank you.
yes, yes, we should have a meeting right after the annual meeting. The annual national meeting, the ULC meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that would
if-
be useful.
If August or September works, we can certainly work to reschedule when we do this meeting.
How about July?
July? Yeah, absolutely.
How about we all extend one day and just hold it?
We could do that.
We ought to look at, of course, of course.
We're in Boston.
Boston next year. Just us and,
Well, then I'd move that one of the things we do is authorize the commission to work with staff to reschedule this meeting for an earlier time next year.
we have a second?
Second?
All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Let's do that.
Aye.
Thank you. Let's plan on that and see if we can coordinate a convenient time that is low cost and high efficiency. But let's get earlier in the process. Thank you for raising that. Not being a member of the legislature, that's kind of not transparent to me.
Yeah.
I think you're on. Go ahead.
Just a question, would it be useful to, on some of these other bills that perhaps you might have an interest in, but think, oh, it's a little late to maybe pass it, get it all prepared and pass it, to refer it to interim study now?
Yeah, we can certainly, I think it's fine, whether we have time or not, I think it's fine for the commission to express interest in the bills they think ought to be considered. And whether those can be prepared in time for this session or not, we can certainly put on record that these are bills we're looking at and working toward at least evaluating whether they should be introduced or not.
Yeah, and I can add, a lot of times, or at least in my experience, you can get bills that are submitted late. They will get drafted at some point during the session. It may be the very last week of the session, which doesn't give it much of a chance of passing. But then it is drafted and ready to go. So when you go to refile it, it doesn't take any additional time. It really goes right to the top, or it can be brought before an interim committee so that they can pass it out favorably and it will be heard at the beginning of the next session.
So that would make it, if we were to recommend that approach for members of the legislature to take that kind of an action, that would allow us and them to alert interested parties locally, sections of the state bar, others in the community who may have an interest, so that when it does get filed or get to the top of the pile, it may make it easier to get it through the end of the session logjam. Okay. Are there others that you wanted to mention, Eric?
The only other one that I was going to get to that was also recommended by the commission is, and this is a big, long acronym. I'm not, it's the URECDVPOA. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that's a continuation of the recognition of domestic. You think I'd recognize that acronym after working on it for 2 years. But I'm sorry, that's it. Just that recognition of enforcement. I thought that was a new one, but it's just a continuation. So those are the ones in particular that, in looking what the commission's recommended and what we might be able to get together for this session, that's the list I think that's probably the most pertinent.
Other commissioners who want to either raise another proposed Uniform Act for discussion at this point? Seeing none, it would appear that We have discussed the Civil Remedies for Unauthorized Disclosure of Intimate Images Act, which Senator McKell feels strongly about, and let's propose that one first as one that we would recommend. Is there any opposition to that? Seeing none, let's add that to the top of the list. We've also discussed the Community Property Disposition at Death Act. Is there any discussion on that one? Do we have a motion to include that on the list? All right, we'll pass that. The Family Law Arbitration Act, we've had some discussion. Any further discussion on that one?
I'd mentioned, at least since the Utah court has at least brought up their might be one that we might want to at least look into and see if that's something that a legislative sponsor might think is a good idea.
Okay.
And I'm happy to, like I said, take it to the bar, and I can even find another sponsor if the members in the commission that are in the legislature don't feel comfortable with it.
All right. Do we have a motion to include it in our recommendation?
I move.
Second? Any opposition? Seeing none, we'll include it on the list. The Recognition and Enforcement of Canadian Domestic Violence Protective Orders Act, also the URECDVPOA, which I'll be
Well done.
studying that
I
first
think-
thing every morning so that I can say it.
I think we should run it just because of the acronym, yeah.
Do we have a motion to include that one, or is there any further discussion first?
I'd move to include it just with the idea that it's quite simple and really, we do get some controversy when we're doing kind of international law things, but I think this one is straightforward and simple enough. I don't think it'll be very controversial.
Oh, I note that,
I'll second it.
thank you, I note that in the write-up, that the Chicago staff says 30 to 40% of all international arrivals in Utah come from Canada. That must be information they got from Delta Airlines. It's been moved and seconded. Any opposition?
If I
Seeing-
could
Go
just
ahead,
discuss,
please.
I'll say,
Absolutely.
assuming there's a favorable recommendation here, I'm happy to take lead on that. I have some 20 or so bills that I'm working on in this session, so I may find someone else that can champion this, but I
Always
can help,
appropriate.
usher it through.
Not only appropriate, but appreciated.
I've been looking through my bill tablets to see what I could move these into. That's what I'm doing right now.
Well, and we appreciate, Commissioners, we appreciate as members of the legislature that we don't anticipate loading or proposing to load you two down with carrying everything that comes as a recommendation from the Uniform Law Commission. But we do appreciate you helping us find
Commissioner
people.
Tusher passes a lot of bills, so don't be afraid to put him to work.
Well, we don't,
I just need a little,
he's new, so
Foresight.
we'll be happy to load him down for a season or two, but. All right, so without opposition, then we'll include that one on the list. So that gives us 4 that we're recommending. Are there any others that any commissioner would like us to consider to carry this year? Have I missed one?
I'd at least point out the 2022 UCC amendments.
Oh,
Those are
yes.
updated regularly. Whether we can get those together for this session, I don't know, but I think it's one that we probably ought to have on our radar.
That one may, given its complexity and its impact, it may be a good one ending up on a study list. Do we have any opposition to it?
You could probably get the banks to support, and that'd be very helpful.
Get the what?
The banks to support.
Oh, I imagine. Thank you, Commissioner Hilliard. Any opposition to including that on the list, putting it probably as, well, I don't know. Do we want to rank these in any fashion or just suggest them? I think we just suggest them and let the legislative body make a decision on how they want to handle those. Any others that anybody sees and would like to include?
Just a question, Commissioner Hilliard, following up about the UCC amendments. Do you want to approach the Bankers Association and see if, in fact, they would be supportive, because I think that would be relevant as to whether that moves forward and how quickly. Do you have contacts?
Well, I tell Howard Hensley, so I'd call, but my experience has been nobody really pays much attention to you until you get a bill filed. And then they come and say, why didn't you talk to me? I did 10 times and you didn't respond. But sometimes the best thing is to file it and then let them come up and see where they are on it, because that usually is the best way to do it, in my experience.
Okay.
This is the kind of bill when you present it to the legislature, you say either vote yes or no. Don't try to amend it. It's so complicated that if you amend it one place, you may have to amend it 3 or 4 other places. So just yes or no. And usually that approach has gotten most of the bills passed unanimously because they're too complicated.
Thank you, Commissioner Hilliard. Ms. Snyder, do you have anything you'd share with us at this point on behalf of either staff or anybody else in Chicago that wants to say something?
I don't have anything to add. I think this has been a great meeting. I especially like hearing from each member of the delegation which committees that they're on. Not every delegation does that, and I think it's a nice thing to share to get people more involved. But what I really want to say is, as you move forward, you're going to run, please feel free to reach out to us. We're here to help. We're here as a resource. We can help coordinate testimony, prepare red lines, help, draft written testimony, anything you need, we're here to help.
Thank you very much. We're pleased to have you with us today. That's very helpful. Thanks to Commissioner Hilliard for making it happen. We have reached the end of our agenda. We're at other items. Does any commissioner have any comment or further item? I see no public joining us, so we'll assume there's no public comment. Commissioners, anything?
Commissioner, this is Lyle. I just suggest if you take one of these bills and need any one of us to come and help you, call us, because we can come down and appear in front of the committee and explain how these bills are put together, the purpose in doing this, especially those like Gay has worked on the drafting committee and Lori has, and I have. It's I think helpful for them to see this is not some wild group in Chicago putting something together. It actually has a lot of input from Utah.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments? We express our thanks for your service, for your participation, for the Senator Hilliard, or Commissioner Hilliard, you have got to get healthy. We wish you well. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today. We appreciate our staff support and the opportunity to meet here in this august chamber. And we look forward to the legislative session and then committee assignments and meeting again in Boston this coming summer. So we'll
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Same to you.
Thank you.
We'll deem the meeting adjourned.